Welcome to another episode of Vina Talks ND Life. I'm absolutely delighted to be welcoming Adam Jones to join us today for what I promise you is going to be a very exciting discussion and definitely a very authentic and on the pulse of the industry and what we expect ourselves to sort of do as people who belong in this sector and care for this sector to do. So without further ado, Adam, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
I certainly will, and thank you for a warm welcome. So I'm Adam Jones. I lead the insurance sector with a specialism of actuarial and insurance risk for a brilliant recruitment company called Merge. We're a small, medium-sized business, very much family-run, family-owned, and very much with personability at the forefront of who we are, what we do. And yeah, thank you for kind of having me as part of all this. And there's a number of things that we'll cover throughout today. But I think to get things initially rolling, the things that kind of drew me to working with yourself, collaborating with yourself, was this idea of celebrating difference in the actuarial sector, a sector I've been part of for 8 years, just over 8 years now. And I take a lot of pride in the fact that it's a very different sector and it's a very niche industry. And yeah, that should be celebrated. So that was kind of what initially brought us together. But I think the other main thing that is worthwhile mentioning from the off is that I personally don't have an affiliation to the ND community. I know that a lot of guests that you've had and a lot of people listening to this today will be have much more direct, relationships with ND. That's not the case for myself, but again, that's why I want to be here. That's why I want to educate myself and others and kind of give a voice from a different perspective. And ultimately, it's not just a personal obligation to do this. There's obviously a professional element as well. But yeah, I'd love to educate myself and others to supporting the ND community across the board.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for showing this curiosity so respectfully as you do and so proactively as again you did. I recall how we first sort of get to meet each other, or got rather, speaking grammatically correctly, once. It was basically after I had published that paper for the IFOA, the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries. And I recall you reaching out on LinkedIn saying, loved reading it. And I think it was more of the interview with the journal of the actuary, basically. And you expressed your interest. You also expressed and shared, and that's something that whether you like to do today as part of the podcast recording or not, I leave it completely and wholeheartedly to you. The personal sort of the lived experience, so to speak, and how you come to notice of neurodivergence and how you've come to appreciate also the skills that come with that and the attitudes that come with that. But essentially, it was you very openly telling me, Vina, how can we work together? How can we join forces? How can I give myself this how can I say this moral responsibility? Let's do it and close the say-do gap by speaking about it. And as you said very correctly in your earlier introduction, celebrate difference. So tell us a little bit more about that. Again, you don't have to disclose any of the items that we've spoken about, but essentially the question, I suppose, would be, and why specific neurodivergence? Perhaps you want to offer some example from your professional sort of experience rather than personal. Up to you.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, all forms of diversity, equality, and inclusion are very important. And you see lots of conversations around various elements of that, throughout LinkedIn and the powers of social media. But this is one that I felt probably isn't spoken about enough, in all honesty. And I refer to the fact that earlier on, I've been in recruitment for over 8 years now, and the conversation around DE and I as a general point has always been there. But conversations around neurodiversity and supporting and the measures that are in place throughout interview processes, throughout onboarding, and even retention of teams within the sector have been very minimal. And I think that's not purposely done. I think it's a case that people just don't know enough, and are probably afraid to try and educate themselves on it, with with not wanting to offend anyone or to not make mistakes. But that's very much where my interest stemmed. Again, off the back of the article that you posted, and this idea of celebrating difference. Yeah, actuarial is a sector that is very different to many others, and I actually take a lot of pride in that difference. And yeah, we should be celebrating it. So yeah, there's just through not knowing enough was the main thing, but also that professional responsibility. Look, I'm in the role of a recruitment consultant where the majority of job moves, career moves are major, monumental, life-altering decisions, and I'm involved in that on a daily basis. So I suppose I'm quite used to it and take it for granted. But for some people, it's a very daunting task. So yeah, I wanted to really highlight what can I do, and it doesn't have to be that I have to have some affiliation with ND to be able to do so. And hopefully, I'm inspiring other people who aren't involved and don't have a direct relationship with ND, but to still support and educate themselves around it.
Beautiful. Yeah. You said you've been in the space for over 8 years. That's specific, obviously, with regard to recruitment of actuarial positions and roles. Have you had people who approach you and say, can I just entrust you with this piece of info? Or I'm open, I've been formally diagnosed or I've self-diagnosed as autistic, ADHD, dyslexic, anything. As we all know, perhaps a little bit of a caveat, neurodivergence is a massive umbrella. It covers many, many things and many neurodevelopmental conditions, from dyspraxia, dyslexia, dysphagia to obviously ASD. But of course, there's elements of anxiety, bipolar, etc., that also are defined as components of the big neurodivergence umbrella. Have there been people who approached you in those 8.5 years? Do you see a resemblance to the national statistics?
Very rarely. It's very rarely come up in conversation. I'm glad you brought that up, because this isn't a cry for people to just suddenly divulge life information to me and to somebody they're interviewing with, or whoever it may be within a recruitment process. But in all honesty, it's not happened enough. And you talk about the national statistics, the thousands of conversations I've had and the very, very small amount of conversation behind it. Now, I suppose I'm in a position of responsibility that I should be asking the right questions to offer the right support mechanisms for these people. So I take some personal accountability to that, but also, we as society, we should be encouraging it, we should be offering it without having to request that information from people. So it's not happened enough. Companies are starting to put more measures in place. And yeah, I'm learning. I'm always learning new ways to open up a conversation to then allow those to feel comfortable to talk about it a little bit more.
Gorgeous. I mean, yes. And again, as a community / movement for our space, our sector, is all about sharing this responsibility and really acknowledging that there's something for us to do collectively. Individually is not going to be good enough. But of course, if we sum up all the individuals who are very much aware, and as you said very correctly, you don't have to know it all. And again, who knows it all? But it's more about giving yourself the permission to not know, and the permission to be, as we said, respectfully curious and ask the question. And possibly, because I suppose you cannot actually go around just asking the question, right? There's an element of reading some traits, being able to read perhaps the anxiety, the awkwardness. I mean, something that perhaps at this stage of the discussion, and I'd love you to introduce it rather than me being the spoiler alert, but you and I wrote a paper together that the CII has and we're very grateful to them. And of course, they've been very kind to publish it. It's coming up on the 3rd of May. So I'm not quite sure. We're going to play the chicken and egg, whether it's going to be the podcast coming up or indeed a paper. But for those who listen as well as read, or perhaps do one or the other, please, can we just both suggest that you go and give it a read? What I'd like you to speak on this note, perhaps if that resonates also with you, is that element of awkwardness. the awkward sort of times when, rather than us feeling like a papyrus of questions towards a candidate that needs to be addressed and they need to be answered, perhaps it's down to us to start reading some traits and trying to put those people at ease and understand that, yes, it's a degree of awkwardness, both for us, whichever role, candidates, people in the recruitment space, consultants, or indeed the hiring managers. We all share these awkward moments where we're trying to read each other, right? So what's your take on that, Adam?
Absolutely, and I think in the article we will refer to it, or we have, or we will, depending on the timing of things. We talk about acknowledging awkwardness, and an interview process is awkward, and it's also an interview process is far from perfect. No two interviews are the same. A hiring manager can ask every single question in the same order and in the same fashion in two different interviews, and ultimately you'll get different responses from those candidates. That therefore makes interviews different on every single occasion. So that's not ideal when you're dealing with an actuarial community that are very quantitative in their approach. That's kind of their mindset. That's the way they are. So to have interviews based on a much more qualitative measure creates that difference in approach. But then again, let's not look at difference as a negative. Let's look at difference as a positive, and that's where this idea of authenticity comes in around interviews. And from an awkwardness perspective, we can talk about empathy all you want, but really, what does that actually achieve? You don't exactly know how somebody else is feeling, whether you're the interviewer, the interviewee, and whatever they've got going on in their respective personal lives, professional lives, and so on. But yeah, this idea of acknowledging the awkwardness, I think, in all honesty, it's there. It's not going to disappear. Let's embrace it. Let's try and have some kind of ways of interacting. But ultimately, I think it's the responsibility of both parties to suggest, how can I help you? Or what do you want to get from this? And what can we do to accommodate? It's the actual angle of the questions rather than just being very typical and very kind of just methodical about things. It's actually having that preparation and just getting through that awkwardness. It's not pleasant. It's not nice, but yeah, it's what you can do to get around it ultimately.
So true, so true. And you said the magic word, prepare. In our community, the neurodivergent community, and I'm sure this is the thing, we always go back into the universal design because preparation is key. Gone are the times when you would just plonk your notebook down the table, that boardroom table, and just wait to be enlightened, or perhaps to meet the eyes of somebody who you gather as one of your mates in that sort of workplace, who will always sort of, have your back, no matter what the contents and no matter how badly or completely not prepared you are. But it's okay, we'll plow on. I think those days are over. Those days are over also in terms of the necessities and the challenges that were presented from the wider framework. The AI, sort of the technological component, the scarcity of talent, obviously the scarcity of clients wanting to open up the pie of interactions with you. So nowadays we have to become more savvy. And those actuaries, given obviously we're speaking about your specialization, and a specialization that I have an awful lot of admiration for. And I have to say, given what I've done in the space, being cross-class enabler, strategist, / originator, I've had the honor, really, the honor of working with some incredible actuaries who are so much more than that curve they have to fit, all the stochastics sort of analysis and whatnot. They are humans who care about our sector, who've got a very firm and a very well evidence-based sort of backed up position on matters ESG. And they care about, obviously, the climate change. They care about the societal sort of challenges. They've got so much more to offer in that place. So by us starting to prepare as an interviewer or interviewee, and indeed as the candidate who gets to navigate the recruitment sort of consultancy space, so important. Can I be a little bit provocative and say, has it crossed your mind, or do you also believe that historically people haven't been sharing because the role of a recruiter has been seen as I've got a role, I need to somewhat box you into something that fits. And so long as you're through the probation period, they'll make some money. That's all good. And I know that not everybody's like that, but historically I'm speaking.
Absolutely. Look, we can't ignore the reputational factor that goes around recruitment, and that's absolutely why I said earlier that I'm not expecting people to, divulge their life stories when they've only known me for 2 minutes on the end of a phone call. And again, things like this allow people to understand the mentality of who we are and what we do. So yeah, that is always going to be the place, and some people may have been stung in recruitment processes. It's not ideal, but unfortunately, like you said, everyone has a reputation in every form of society. So yeah, we're certainly aware of that. But ultimately, this is about building relationships over time, and that's where I take that responsibility of actually giving my time to this person, learning about them, having understandings with what they do, and just having a genuine approach to things. And again, it's all about finding these tips, these ways of creating opportunity for people to talk about, how they feel and the differences that they go through. Because again, it's, even in the non-ND community, people are different in terms of anxiety and things like that. And you even look at the idea of interviews nowadays being video interviews. A lot of people take that for granted as, oh, it's easier to do a video interview from home. But it can be a lot more difficult for certain people. So it's about asking them what they prefer, what preparation they need in particular to address the concerns that they've got. And through length of conversation and taking time to get to genuinely know someone, you won't, it's like an onion, you take the layers away and ultimately you then find out a little bit more about them and the provisions they may or may not need. And yeah, I think that's vitally important. Yeah, recruitment will always kind of have that transactional approach. Let's not ignore it, but ultimately, those that stand the test of time are the ones that do the job officially and properly with that level of granularity and detail.
So true. I mean, I have to come clean and say I'm yet to have an alpha to omega sort of positive experience with recruitment. I always find, and I think I dig myself a hole often enough because obviously I cannot help it. I'm just being me. And if I see something that doesn't resonate, I'm going to sort of point it out. Then I almost see the other person on the other sort of side opposite me kind of saying, why can't you just let it go? Just let it go. And if we place you, then perfect, great for both of us. And I'm thinking, well, actually, no, it's not great for both of us. It's not actually great for either of us.
No.
It's not going to be great for me because I'm not going to stay there as long as I should in order to grow in this environment. Okay. And indeed contribute as much as I can. And it's not good for you because you would have lost this individual of the books, because I would remember that it was just a quick transactional placement. And perhaps again, it goes back to what you said, address the concerns. For some people, this transactional element takes away the personalization and some anxieties that might come with that, in the sense that you're looking too much into me. It's fine, just use me as a product. I'm a product of underwriting. So let me just hop on to something else. I'm not looking for something further. But it boils down to, as you said, getting to know the person. You see, I don't want to be viewed as a product. I want to be viewed rather as a person who's got a range of skill sets that perhaps for one job they could be called strategy, for another could be called origination, another has gonna have, or perhaps it might have a completely different name, perhaps a name that we are yet to formulate, but it resonates with what that culture of that company really is looking to achieve and what they identify as being my skill sets. So how can we do that? There's an element of time. How do you navigate this incredible mission of yours against the time frame?
It's a really probing question. And I think the way to go about that is that you talked about the time elements. There's no substitution for that. I think ultimately it will take its time to formulate, and reputationally that will, fall out in a number of years of doing the profession. I've said it before, I'm 8 years in at this stage, and even now I'm still developing those relationships and having that professionalism, that accountability on a daily basis. I think what really stands the test of time is how, as a recruitment consultant, and I'm very specific on that word of being a consultant, because that the job is to give genuine advice, the bad, the good, actually advise on all the options possible. But the test of time certainly comes around how you conduct yourself when things don't go your way. And again, if we're looking at the transactional elements, so if somebody says to me, "Oh, well, thank you for that interview, but I'm not interested." Now, the way that I approach myself is that's fine. It's okay. You know, you're giving yourself that opportunity to have that conversation, to educate yourself. And ultimately, it will always build good experience. Now, you know, from a transactional perspective, I've not achieved anything there. But again, that's not necessarily what it's about. And as soon as you do the good around these things, that will resonate. And then that will allow somebody to come back to you when they are looking again in a few months' time. So it's about having that genuine approach at all costs and at all times, and looking at the longer term. Really, that's how I built myself around all of this. So you kind of said it yourself in your part there. Time, there's no substitution for it.
I love this. Having that genuine approach at all costs, at all times. I am not necessarily a generation sort of prone, how can I say, a generalist, but more and more that I get to meet the new generations of very competent professionals who come into the space, I am extremely grateful that you guys exist and that you come in order to repurpose and reframe the older paradigm. Again, it's not about old and young. It's all about possibly, I mean, things can have worked for a good length of time nicely and can have produced the necessary sort of outcomes and results. But as we say, each era carries its own challenges. And I think perhaps in the era that we currently sort of live, given everything that surrounds us, we need to perhaps consider and reconsider how we do things. And sometimes, yeah, stay true to our own values. And if certain things don't work, don't accept. And you said something quite important there. Well, actually, two items I'd like to not throw you both items in the same sort of question that I'm infamous as doing, apparently, but and very proud of also, but perhaps one at a time. So I hear you speaking very clearly about an element of we as candidates, and you hear me speaking about we as being hiring, being a candidate, be also on the side of recruitment, because I've done it all. But speak for once, or let's assume, speaking as candidates, we do carry the responsibility of calling it in before we call it out and stating our preferences and being open, trusting the person who we're holding hands with, the recruitment consultant, trust them that they will carry us in a way that's dignified and there's a way that's authentic for our needs. But for you, Adam, to get to know the needs and the support and the adjustments necessary for somebody like Vina, Vina needs to get a little bit closer, explain to you, where I stand. Is that something you'd expect the candidates to do?
Yeah, I mean, I don't ever expect it in a sense, but ultimately, if I'm doing my job naturally and the way that I've kind of attested myself to do so, I think it's a natural byproduct, and my approach and how I kind of ask and probe certain questions should therefore allow. And again, an example of fairly recently talking to someone about actuarial exams and actually talking about how actuarial exams is a little bit flawed in the sense that the pass mark changes dependent on different sittings and different exams, and it's actually a certain value. If everyone does very well, the pass mark goes up. If everyone struggles on the paper, then the pass mark goes down. So through a conversation around that, naturally led to someone talking about how they get allocated extra time on their exams. And again, I certainly didn't pressure them or even expect them to talk about why they are allocated extra time on their exams. But through that, I've created an opportunity for someone to express themselves by going away from the norm of here's a job, how much money do you want, where do you want to be working, etc. So by actually just having a genuine conversation about something of interest to them, I've unearthed, something that's important to them to share with me. And then ultimately, I'm representing a company in this scenario that I know is very accommodating to extra time and support during the interview process itself. So I've then been allowed to sell that as a benefit about this company, and that actually it shouldn't be a benefit, it should be a norm. But ultimately, this person now knows that information that they didn't know previously. So um, I go back to what I said earlier. It's a natural byproduct if I do my job well. If I do my job transactionally, I can't expect a candidate to suddenly open up on all things about themselves. So I have to be a little bit vulnerable myself to create vulnerability from the other people. I have to talk about my experiences and my personal traits, which again, some things I like to talk about, some things I don't want to talk about. But ultimately, by having that vulnerability, it reciprocates in others and it allows others to do the same.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes back to awkwardness, acknowledging awkwardness, we said earlier, and I hear us now speaking of, and you obviously contributing the vulnerability sort of issue, acknowledging vulnerability, being vulnerable in order to connect, in order for people to understand that, yes, you're human, you're a humane human, very important. And this is really the absolute necessity, if you will, is the foundational principle of then leading the genuine conversations. If you see a stern human who basically goes very transactional, then claiming that, but I was trying to have a genuine sort of conversation with you, you kind of go, hold on. In what ways can I accept it as genuine when I didn't hear you, I suppose, accepting your own or speaking about your own vulnerabilities, being human, showing any degree, even small degree of understanding as to how I feel, and the previous sort of discussions. I mean, often enough people want to know what you've done, the role that you've held in previous companies. They don't want to know necessarily or give you time to explain what you enjoy doing and how you see your role in the future, rather than the perennial question of where would you see yourself in 5 years' time? Exactly where we should be focusing. But let's take this genuine conversation onto the other sort of side of the question that I wanted to sort of address almost as a package earlier. How can we enable genuine conversations with the hiring managers, with the employer? How do you make it genuine there?
It's not easy. First and foremost, let's acknowledge that it's not something that can just be fixed overnight and can kind of be done around this. Something like this around me, you and I sat here talking about, acknowledging it and embracing it and celebrating it. That is the first and foremost, because there are people that are blissfully unaware, and I put myself in that category previously. People don't ever intend to upset or to not include around these things. But yeah, I think the first thing is to actually educate them that this exists, because they genuinely might not know. They might have family members or whatever it may be that have affinity, but they may not even think about it on a professional environment. So I think that's the first thing, is to just create that awareness and create the noise. And I've talked to you previously in our sessions when we were putting the paper together around the fact that the majority of people speaking about ND are those that have that direct collaboration with ND, but that doesn't have to be the case. It's just because we don't experience something personally doesn't mean we can't explore it further and actually put it into practice in our own professionalism. So creating that awareness, that noise is the first thing, certainly. I think for hiring managers, it's not necessarily about asking questions. If we just rely on asking questions, you're not going to get that answers. And it's a very similar scenario to when I speak to a candidate and I try to learn about the candidate, the hiring manager can do the same thing. So offering information about your team as a hiring manager and talking about the different personalities in your team and talking about the different ways of working and how you celebrate different, individuals in that team, and actually going into the granular detail of what these people are about and what they offer, will therefore allow others to express themselves and say, well, oh, actually, I'm like that person, but I'm not like the other person. Or, well, somebody adds a strength here. Well, actually, that's not one of my strengths, but my strength might be doing this. And again, they're just very high level examples. But I think this idea of parachute stories and vulnerability around your team and how you manage people, as a hiring manager, that will allow people to open up themselves. An interview shouldn't really, in my opinion, be seen as a hiring manager and a candidate. It's two people having a conversation. You're on an even keel. So, again, from a candidate side, and I'm kind of veering off the question a little bit, but from a candidate side, you are just as important in an interview as the hiring manager. It isn't just conversations and interviews going in one direction. So that fear factor shouldn't necessarily be there, but it's the responsibility of the hiring manager to put somebody at ease, to put themselves at ease, and just have that conversation. And we're in an age now of much more competency driven interviews. We're not just doing this, quantitatively. It's much more about getting to know people. So hopefully that happens. But yeah, hiring managers have a huge responsibility to play. And yeah, I think once you're aware of it, you educate yourself on it. Quite simply, ND is the idea of thinking, acting, behaving, processing differently. And when you really think about that, that's great. That's great in a team, because you want all these different team dynamics. So encourage it, celebrate it. That's obviously what you and I came together about. And yeah, hiring managers hopefully can do the same.
Couldn't agree more. And here, the getting to know people and having a discussion, fear factor out of the way. Absolutely. Please, more no fear kind of statements we need to lead our lives, not just professional, personal, anything and everything. So we don't need fear. Fear can be so stifling and stagnating and really such a big sort of blockage of evolution, conscious evolution and progress. I love the fact of the conversation also as part of gone are the times that we were playing the good cop, bad cop kind of, scenarios. I mean, how dark age kind of really little almost games. And much as I do appreciate gamification, we speak in education and gamification of education, just to instill the fun factor. I think when you're there to just torture, obviously, and I'm saying it with a smirk and I shouldn't, because a certain sort of, words like torture that we shouldn't even ideally use because they wouldn't be part of our daily life. And yeah, some people find interviews traumatic, and they can be traumatic, and they can be because, of course, people have got their own elements of lived experiences, traumas, PTSDs, and things that can be triggered. So how about approaching each other as humans who are genuinely interested to see how they can fit in the team? And that's sort of what we said on the paper, and thank you very much for highlighting today, is acknowledging that we need all different types of people in our team. And the more we speak about it, the more the chance the other person, the interviewee, will also get to sort of think for themselves, okay, does that suit me? Can I see myself? Can I visualize myself being part of this team? If not, move on. There's other places. So you're so much in the choosing position as the hiring manager. So important. One final thing from me I'd like to sort of contribute is, I heard you speaking and you give me so much hope, and by all means, there's a great company out there people owe to explore. But of course, get to know Adam and speak and put Adam to the test. He wants to be tried out. He wants, to hear from you. And yeah, you never said, it all, but you definitely sort of came with a very clear message, which was, I'd like to try. I'd like to make a contribution. I'd like to learn and become better. But you also made me realize the enablement sort of value that an inclusive corporate culture of those companies that we all, one way or another, deal with, you as being your clients for who you try to obviously find relevant and suitable talent, if they do work on a positive corporate culture, it will be an enabler for every part of this ecosystem. There will be an enabler for Adam doing a better job, because Adam will go out looking at these candidates as genuinely as he can, and he affords to, knowing that when they are taken to that interview stage, or when those CVs are being passed on to the hiring managers will have a broad horizon, an open mind to evaluate. Otherwise, it all goes to no avail.
Yeah, and there's this idea of unconscious bias. Look, again, it's not something you can remove. It's there in society and in all factors. And again, how do you change that? Sometimes it's not able to change. But by this idea of education around things, and I look at my own personal journey of kind of just trying to learn more and kind of understand this, as I said, from a professional perspective. Every time I hear the letters ND, or I hear neurodivergence, or whatever it may be in that similar bracket, I automatically think about, well, it's people thinking, acting, processing, behaving differently, and that's great. And that's literally the first thing I think of. Now, somebody who has a direct involvement with some traits of ND will obviously think of their own personal responsibilities and might think of how challenging it can be, and might think of elements of autism or dyspraxia or dyslexia, whatever it may be. But actually, those that don't experience it, if you look at its definition at its absolute core, and this is where we can educate hiring managers who, like myself, don't have that kind of affiliation to ND, then actually you embrace it. You automatically go into it feeling positive. So that changes that idea of the unconscious bias around things. So that's a very powerful way to remove that, but also just create that open-mindedness that when you see these CVs and you speak to these people, and in the perspective of a hiring manager, you actually want to see this. And that this is that idea of celebrating it. Again, just to repeat kind of what we've already said and what we've put in the article, but it should be celebrated, and why it isn't, who knows? But let's kind of change the narrative on that. And like I say, it's only a small piece of it. Let's give it a go.
Wonderful. That has been music to my ears. And on that music sort of front, let's make some noise, people. Raise the noise levels, make people aware, be open, think positively, because obviously when you are positive, then that energy is what you project out there, and that's the energy you get back. And for those of you who are currently looking for a new job, you're in the process of interviews, best of luck. And perhaps after you listen to this one, you will feel another good reason to open yourself up, be authentic, be genuine, and really understand that you're choosing as much as getting chosen. So all the best. Thank you very, very much today, Adam. It's been such a pleasure to call for that paper with you. And now, obviously count you as a friend and have you today as such a great guest to the podcast episode. I cannot wait for the next interaction.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.